Okay, we're getting into an hour when we're talking about a nation, Kenya, but there's another nation. There's the hustler one. And we're asking ourselves certain questions. The promise upon which a new administration delivered its mandate, or rather delivered a promise of a mandate that it was going to bring in. This hour, we're going to be talking about the reality on the ground. What is actually going on with these hustlers who form this nation, and the promises that were made to them, and how we'll be talking, or rather moving into the future. Our guest this hour is political analyst Steve Mbogo. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you.
Mark Bichachi is our guest host today.
Okay.
And he's no stranger to the room, but he oftentimes, is here with us, and we discuss things. And so, he'll be here. CT Muga, Okoh. Eric Latiff is not here today, but he's here in spirit. His spirit is hovering around somewhere.
Did you just make him a ghost?
I kind of did.
There's something strange in the neighborhood. Who are you going to call?
Mark, a spiritual being.
A spiritual being.
Yes.
I think we can feel his existence.
Yeah. I'll say it to his face again also when he's here. So we're getting into that conversation this hour. And also welcome, we have to say this every time, welcome to our audiences on different streaming platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and also our audiences on KTN Home. Welcome. As we get into this conversation, Steve, karibu sana to the Situation Room.
Asante.
We go around the continent, well, CT does. His passport is full. This week, I don't know how he does it, but it's quick flights. This week, he's gone to the Republic of Congo, and he's brought with him a basket of proverbs. He'll tell you what today's proverb is, and then your assignment is to tell us how that proverb resonates with you and what it means to you.
Okay.
Sava?
Sava.
Okay.
Bien. Bien. Sava, sava.
Sava, sava. Yeah. A boat of pity will never cross the water.
A boat of pity will never cross the water.
Yes.
In my own understanding, it simply means that complaining, self-pity, or having what you call basic self-pity can never solve a solution to your problems. So basically, in my own terms, I resonate it with normal life. And a situation where someone is feeling pity on himself rather than finding a fundamental solution to their problem, they can never find a solution to the problems they're experiencing. Yeah.
By just sitting and, nobody knows.
And wallowing in pity.
The troubles I've seen. Okay. So doing that is not going to get you anywhere, essentially, is what we're saying.
Exactly.
Okay.
You have to find a fundamental solution to your problems. Yes.
Okay. All right.
So if it's a boat, you have to fix it.
Okay.
Yes. So if it's leaking,
or
you need
if
to
it's a
fix
speedboat, at least at the very least, turn on the engine.
Turn on the engine and make sure you have enough fuel to cross you over.
Voila.
So the person who sang the song, nobody knows the trouble I see.
Yeah.
Nobody knows my sorrow. So they had missed the point.
They were. That was the guy sitting in the middle of the boat in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Trying to propel himself on pity.
On pity.
Yes.
And do you think he made much progress?
Not really.
Well,
but anyway, he sang.
But his song is a hit, so
it's actually a really sad song.
His song is a hit. So
yeah.
Speaking of sadness, there could be folks who are in a part of a okay, well, let's start. About a year and a half ago, a nation was formed.
Yes.
Okay, it's probably, if we're looking at it in the world today, maybe one of the youngest nations.
Yes.
I don't know that it has boundaries. I don't know that it has a passport, or that it has a military or a police force.
Yes.
I don't know that it has a central bank, but it's a nation all the same. It was created by word of mouth, and people kind of joined this nation and then were, what do you call them? Card-carrying, fully what? Yes.
Card-carrying members.
Thank you, of this nation.
Yes.
Card-carrying citizens of this nation.
Yes.
And it was by the words of the current president.
Yes.
Right? The hustler nation was born.
Yes.
And there were people then who got citizenship to this nation by virtue of the fact of their economic status, or wherever it is that they were on the totem pole in this country. So the hustler nation was formed, and it was people who maybe didn't get a chance we didn't have the time where opportunity and experience then married.
Yes.
And the president came in and said, you don't have to be special. You don't have to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth. What we are doing as a new administration is we are creating a movement whereby we're going to create opportunity. And we're going to make sure that you as individuals can meet opportunity, and then boom, we go. In no time, we'll be flying towards economic development.
Yes.
We'll be flying towards personal development.
Yes.
We are going. You don't have to be dynastic. You can actually work hard, and because this country has provided opportunities for you, you will go. Sounds great, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Does this nation still exist?
I think we can all agree that all that was a big fallacy. Indeed, the nation exists. We have the movement of the hustlers. But, the biggest problem in this country, and I've said it again and again, is what we call political illiteracy. And many people in the political stage understand this very well. And that's why they understand that Kenyans are so gullible. And it's so easy to persuade Kenyans on the aspect of hope. And what you're experiencing today, all that was false hope. And that's why Kenyans are tired today. They say when you subject the citizens through political exploitation, social degradation, economic exploitation, the only outcome is resistance. If you speak to any Kenyan out there, no one is happy. And in fact, Kenyans have stopped complaining. If you go to the ground, Kenyans have stopped complaining. And when people stop complaining, then that's a big danger to the nation. No one is talking about cost of living anymore. No one is talking about these punitive laws and taxes and regulations being put in place every day. So that is a time bomb in waiting. That's the reality. Some of us who grew up with our old folks, we were being taught when you were young that when you're married and you have a problem with your wife and your wife doesn't confront you anymore, then you should be more scared, because that means probably your wife is looking for a way out. So the government in place today should be very careful. Kenyans have started practicing what you call self-preservation. You've seen doctors go on strike for more than 30, 40 days before even a single politician joined in. And the doctors themselves were very clear. I saw the head of the Doctors Association clearly saying, we even don't need members of parliament. The politicians should go back to parliament and practice they go and amend laws. We don't need them in our demonstrations. So next thing, the doctors are on the street. Next thing, maybe it's the doctors, maybe even the police, maybe all of us. Because I think this country as a nation is held captive. I think as a country we're discussing the wrong issues. Many a times the president has said clearly that his hands are held captive. His hands are tied. You remember very well when the issue of fuel subsidy and the fuel pricing skyrocketed. And the members of parliament, when he had a PG, the members of parliament tried to tell him that, the ground is different. People are really complaining. He said, I can't do anything. My hands are tied. So that begs the question, this is the father of the nation. He is the most senior public servant in the country. When he tells you his hands are tied, then you need to understand and research and understand why is he talking about him being in a position where he's held captive. And I think President William Ruto is really held captive.
How so?
Today, most of the policies being implemented in this country are not implemented and created here by the legislative or basically our Kenyan technocrats or parliament, even technocrats. Most of these policies are brought forward by international organizations such as the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, the WHO. They're the guys running the show.
Like which policies are you talking about, Steve?
When you talk of from agricultural policies, economic policies, health policies, majority of these policies are internationally created. Today, I will say in this country, the globalists are taking over the country. These are the issues you're supposed to be talking about. I've spoken to many leaders, but leaders, most of them say they are scared of speaking about these things.
But you do know that we will ask when you say such things. That
Of course, and that's why I'm here, City.
Do you have evidence to support
Yes,
your
that's
view?
why I'm here, City.
Okay, you mentioned certain sectors. You talk about health. You talk about agriculture.
Now,
you talk about,
City-
what are some of the policies that we're talking about that you say are
Yes.
introduced by external powers that are then being implemented in the country locally?
Now, that begs a very good conversation. You know, in life, they say information is power and knowledge is king. The biggest deficiency we have in this country is that people don't read. People don't read. People are so gullible. We have been synchronized to believe that there are certain people or certain powers that be or certain channels of communication that are the ones that are supposed to be right. So in Kenya today, anyone will only believe what is told by maybe the president or the opposition leaders or the leaders that exist at the
But
moment.
do you believe that to be true? What you just
It's very true. I'm taking you through now.
yes.
Today, the world is experiencing a very big changeover in terms of administration. And this has been a very long-term plan in the form of what we call the New World Order. The New World Order agenda is an agenda that did not start yesterday. This is an agenda that started being formulated. And whatever I'm saying, City, is out there. I want Kenyans to go and read, including you. Then maybe you can change your perception and stop bombarding Ruto here, and Ruto has been held captive.
You've now changed the topics and you've come into bombarding Ruto. And I'm thinking,
The question,
Yes.
there are two questions.
Yes.
First and foremost,
Yes.
I am one of those people who honestly believe that the president's silence on the hustler nation is excellent politics. That's simply because it was not a sustainable narrative after an election. But secondly, when you speak about New World Order and you talk about Kenya being held captive and changeovers in government, it seems a bit more conspiracy theory than factual political analysis. So, for example, let's take one thing. Let's take the current tax regime.
Yes.
How would you say that the West is directly influencing Kenya, and how and where, which office?
Exactly. Now, when you talk of the tax policies, specifically the economic policies that have been put in place, you and I will agree that for the last 10 years, this is not an agenda that started yesterday. Even from the time of Uhuru Kenyatta, there were so many tax policies that were brought into play that many Kenyans could not resonate with. Not even the tax policies, including economic regulations. You remember, when Uhuru was president, they came about with a policy saying you cannot even withdraw 1 million or bank 1 million or transact in cash.
Without
Yes.
an explanation, for proof of source of funds. There was a caveat.
Yes, there was a caveat.
Yeah.
When the Kenya Kwanza administration was campaigning, the first thing they said is that when we get into government, the first thing we'll do is we'll remove these punitive measures. Because believe you me, today, majority of the traders in this country or people who are in business are in cash economies. There are people who buy, traders buy goods and sell. When you limit the amount of money I can trade, and let me tell you, so many traders, when you talk to business people, they'll tell you...
is the money really limited?
It's
Are you
really limited.
Are you really limited by how much you can trade?
Because
Yes.
They're asking you to, yeah.
It's very simple. You have 1.0001 million shillings, and you go to the bank. The only question they'll ask you is, what do you do? If you're a trader, you say, these are my fish, these are my customers, and that's it. And usually after the first time you explained, the next 100 times you had to bank, you didn't need to explain.
So how many traders or business people have established forms or structures of business where they have invoices and receipts and pro forma invoices to present to the banks? I'm talking about this now, basically the normal traders. So that created what we call a discouragement, even the morale in trading.
The question you raise is actually a pertinent one.
Yes.
But banks don't necessarily have to rely on invoices, and all they look at is if you have an account, they know the cash flow.
Not really.
That you have.
No,
They can look at your account and they can tell what it is that you do. Because when you open an account, at some point you will explain
when you go to City, when you go to any bank,
yes,
they ask for what you call, and it's not the problem of the bank. These are regulations set by the central bank. The bank will request you to provide what you call supportive documents. And I'm talking about now that structure of having all those supportive documents. Well and good. They came in the name of what we call curbing money laundering. But look at it this way. I'm talking about a situation where President Ruto clearly stated, including the Kenya Kwanza campaign manifesto, is that the first thing they'll do is to curb that. Till to date, nothing has happened. When you speak to them, the first thing they did in Parliament, they tried to amend and put a cap to about 10 million shillings. But the bill could not go anywhere.
And are we able to point that to some kind of external influence?
Of course, that's where I'm going to.
Okay, please.
When they tried to do that, apparently, that was a global regulation set on the Central Bank of Kenya. So there's nothing the president could do, even on himself. Listen, economies are built by ensuring people have money in their pockets so that there is circulation of money. When I restrict the movement of that money, it means we are not going to trade in terms of...
But Mbogo, the restriction you speak of doesn't actually exist.
It's not a restriction. I can tell you, genuinely, even Mutumba people who sell cash on cash, they are not restricted from depositing even 5 million shillings if they want. The proof of funds is not even about invoices. It is about proof of reputation. In fact, let me assist you. It is the reputation that you have with the bank. So, for example, if Mark Bichachi banks 50,000 every day, and then suddenly I'm banking 1 million, my bank will ask me a question. But if I keep banking 1 million and they know my reputation and where I get that money from, there is no restriction upon my business. Secondly, we must understand that the world over, there is a body that watches black money flows and fraud, which Kenya had a better rating, and we are trying to maintain that rating because Kenya, in fact, today in the newspapers, there is a doctor who was sentenced because of participating with Al-Shabaab and other terror organizations.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yes. So there is security needs. There is needs of ensuring that black money from drugs and things like that is kept away. So the thing is, it is only difficult. It is only an impediment if you are a magic money person. It's an impediment because then you cannot explain where you got your 1 million shillings. But if you do legitimate business in this country, it is not difficult.
I love the way you're putting it. You see, in theory, it sounds so easy. But I'm telling you from a businessman's point of view. I'm not here to criticize anybody. I'm speaking from a businessman's point of view. Are you aware that majority of even the traders from Kenya today, including the manufacturing industry and business people, many people have opted to move to the neighboring countries just because of, for example, even the banking laws? I'm telling you. So whatever you're saying is very good in the aspect of controlling. But at the end of the day, these are things that have hindered our ability to transact. The reason why this government was campaigning on it, because they knew they were feeling the pinch, but they realized they could not do anything. The other thing on economic regulations are the taxes. For example, the fuel levies and all that, the taxations. The president himself was very clear when he was being questioned about the issue of taxation from 8% to 16%. He was very open enough to tell Kenyans and his politicians that his hands are tied. The other day when he tried to introduce the subsidy, fuel subsidy, the IMF in itself, it was in the mainstream media, the IMF in itself was not happy with that decision and they asked the government to reverse it. So when you look at most of these policies, these are policies that are set by external forces in this country. And that begs the question, what is their interest here? And that's where I was going to.
Looking at a nation like Kenya that is a sovereign state, and that then will practice the different elements or attributes of sovereignty. Would it make sense that everything that is happening today, which you're saying then essentially impedes this same sovereignty that we talk about, actually is the reality? That everything that is being done, coming from your original statement, whereby the president's hands are tied, and we say do something, and we say if the tone at the top is not 1, 2, 3, it is actually not his fault. But the problem is that his hands are tied by external forces in a country where sovereignty is practiced, and he is the head of the people.
Now, I started by speaking about what we call the New World Order. The New World Order agenda in itself has one purpose. Its main purpose is to break the sovereignty of all nations and build what we call a one world government. This is information that is out there. This decision came about in the year 1946, immediately after the Second World War. And on the 13th of February in 1946, the United Nations formulated what we call the United Nations Charter. And its main objective, this is a document that is online, anyone can go and read about it. Its main objective was to break down sovereignties of all countries and build what we call a one world government. And that's where we are heading to. The ultimate target for these programs is in the year 2030. Many people will call it conspiracy, but I'm telling you, these things are real. The speed at which the globalists are spearheading these agendas in this country is very high. And these are the things you're supposed to talk about, and no one is talking about them. Many a times you've even heard, I think one of the last proper interviews by the former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, he mentioned something very crucial, but no one understood what he said. He said, it has come to my knowledge that it is not even Ruto who rigged these elections, but there are other parties who had interests in Kenya that did the rigging for him. He mentioned it in his interview. Number two, Kalonzo Musyoka himself, I think a month ago, he was in an interview and he stated clearly, he said, I understand there is some form of change of governance in the world. And if that is the case, we should all be involved in these discussions. And that is when they were formulating this NADCO report. But you see, the problem with us is that we look at things on the face value. You might criticize in the name of conspiracy theory. But if I outline to you the formulation of this agenda and the things that are happening here in this country at the moment, you realize they're the same. Number one, the talk of creating a one world government with one president. Number two, one military system, one judicial system, one currency, that is a cashless currency for the whole world. There will be control of what you call agriculture. In their formulation, they're saying food and agriculture will be taken from individual owners to corporations. These are things that are happening in other countries. That's why you're seeing even farmers in Germany, in Holland, in Switzerland, they were on the streets the other day. It is because of those policies. And the same policies are the policies we are passing here. If you look at one of the items that is being fought in this country today, is food and agriculture. Left, right, center. The policies that were being implemented in this country, not even now, from Uhuru's time. I remember when Kinjuri was the Minister of Agriculture. He formulated what we call the strategy document. They approved the use of what we call the encouragement of fortified foods in regards to comparison to organic foods. They created a law whereby today, if you go in the villages, it is even a crime to share seeds. Companies, foreign companies were given rights to patent their seeds here, and you're not supposed to plant other seeds other than patented seeds. Steve, and these are global companies.
If you could just allow us, because you're saying so many things. Okay. Let's go back a bit.
Okay.
There's the UN and there's the Bretton Woods institutions. Now, Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, etc., they do influence the economic and trajectory of many countries.
Yes.
Simply because if you are going to borrow money from them, and as countries we can't give them a piece of land in Shinyalu and say this is your surety. So what we do in terms of accepting that debt is create fiscal changes within our economy that are supposed to help. Now, I'm not saying these institutions
changes which are agreeable to them.
Yes.
All
in their terms.
Yes. And which gives them the confidence that they need
to lend us money.
Yes.
Now, I'm not by any means saying they're saints, because we know there have been many countries that have gone into crisis because of World Bank issues.
Course.
However, when we then say it is a one world government agenda, we are forgetting that China and Russia and much of the Middle East
and India
BRICS.
and other institutions
Yes.
and other countries that are world powers,
Yes.
India being the fourth largest military in the world, for example, China being second, do not agree with many of the
idea.
things, not just with even the idea of what you're proposing, but they don't even agree with the IMF and World Bank
As
and World Trade
institutions.
Yes.
Organization and things like that.
Yes.
So the world has a duplicity, a multiplicity, if you will, of voices. Thirdly, the issue of agriculture and the patents behind seeds and then fortification. You're correct. Yes, there are seeds that have been manufactured by certain institutions, and they hold the patents. For example, the pink pineapple. Have you ever seen the pink pineapple? It looks really nice, but you can't plant it and propagate it. That is intellectual property conversation. However, when you put them together, and these things are not necessarily related because the World Bank has nothing to do with seeds, then we're putting too many things together. And for the sake of our listeners, let's itemize and compartmentalize issues.
Exactly.
Okay,
thank you. Now, one thing you need to understand is that you've said a very important thing about the other powers that is coming up, and that is the BRICS nations. We have Brazil, Russia. Actually, up to date, we have more than 87 nations which have signed bilateral agreements with the BRICS nations to work under their form of leadership and transact with them. The reason why in Africa today we have close to 49 countries out of 55 who have fully signed bilateral trade agreements with Russia and were present in the Russia summit, that is the 2023 summit, is because most of these nations are not happy with these formulations and policies being pushed by the West in their countries. If we speak of East Africa today, believe you me, Kenya, we've been left alone.
By whom?
By the rest of East African communities. Uganda,
We've
Left alone as per what?
we are the only ones supporting the West agenda today. Actually, we are in the name of the puppets of the West.
Okay. Stephen Mbogo is our guest this hour, and talking about one of the things that we left upon is that the president's hands are actually tied in certain things that he can or cannot do, and the people who hold these handcuffs are external influences in terms of nations and institutions.
Your last statement seems to imply that we have a lame duck president.
Exactly, a puppet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And if we say that, then we are saying that either the man didn't know what he was doing when he was campaigning, because he campaigns and then gets to this position, and then suddenly it's like he's surprised by what he finds. I find that to be perhaps the complete opposite of the representation of the president as I see him.
And we cannot imagine that President William Ruto, with his character, took exactly one day to change his entire personality to fit into the shoes of the West.
This is a very deliberate president. He knows what he's doing. There's no question about it. We may think we understand what he's doing, or we may think he doesn't, but he clearly knows. He knows what he's doing,
and he's very focused on his perspective. So,
Exactly.
I don't see him getting into a situation that he doesn't understand.
Yeah, and he's the one who's been complaining the most of African presidents about how they are treated with the West.
Well, I mean, if we want to look
earlier.
at let's look at it very
when
clearly.
did you last hear him complain?
Well, hang on. Let's look at exactly what happened.
Yes.
I don't think he was the president of Kenya for 3 months even, when one of the very early conversations he had was about debt prejudice. He was talking about financial prejudice when it came to dealing with, and I don't like to call it that, but that's what it is, the North and the South. and in terms of who then gets precedent or who then gets beneficial treatment when it comes to borrowing. And he was very clear about that. He spoke to the presidents of different countries when he sat in Paris at the invitation of Emmanuel Macron, and he said very clearly, this behavior needs to stop. Did not sound to me like a man who was held under the influences of external pressure. It didn't sound to me like a man when he talked about climate financing and this business of having conferences, when we opened a conference here in Nairobi, and he said, you people are wasting time here having conferences and meetings when there are things we can actually be doing. He then went on to have a climate summit right here in Nairobi when he echoed the same sentiments, not last year, this year, when he talked about some of these things. Does not sound to me like a man who is shackled by the influences of external pressure. Doesn't sound to me. He could have a different agenda, but I do not believe that he is actually pushing the agenda of external nations. They could be beneficial to his government, but I don't think that they are taking the overriding precedent. I would need to see directly that it's when they say, President Ruto, if you do not allow 50% of your parliament to be 1, 2, 3, then I think if we see something like that, then we would understand. And it may not come in such clear terms, but I think there would need to be something else that would show me and say, okay, actually, yeah. Look at examples when we say that there's a housing tax that has been brought into the country. Is that external influence? When we talk about the fact that he's saying that in his government that there needs people with fake certificates need to be thrown out. When he's talking about the fact that there needs to be a cut down or a shaving off of all of this extra money that's being spent, where is the foreign influence there? Where do we see this actually that we can say, you know what, there it is, and we can understand that the decisions are not being made to the benefit of the hustler nation because the president is pandering to the whims of external pressure? Where is it?
Exactly. Now, City, you'll agree with me. When you want to understand the real problems you're going through, you have to open up your mind and look at your surrounding and the things happening around you. Whatever I'm saying, I'm not here to lament that President Ruto is doing right or is doing wrong. What I'm saying is President Ruto has put the interests of the West more than our personal interests.
And I'm asking you, Steve, where?
Yes.
One. Give me one.
Yes.
I'm not even going to say three.
Yes.
One example of whereby you say he's putting the interests of the West over and above those of Kenya.
There are so many issues.
I just want one.
So many issues.
I just want one.
I will start with issues, for example, like security. We've had a very, very, very long discussion and deliberation about the issue of deploying policemen to Haiti. Believe you me, and you and I know, that it is not in President Ruto's interest to send our soldiers or our policemen specifically, not even the soldiers, to Haiti. But this was an idea created by the UN and the United States of America.
Steve, was it in his interest to send our soldiers to DRC?
That was Africa Union.
Again, it doesn't matter whether it was African Union, but we sent our soldiers. So was he pandering to the whims of the AU?
That is as per our constitution. The constitution allows us to only deploy the military and not the police.
True. You can only deploy the police when you're going to take over civilian roles like training and softer skills. That we understand.
Yes. So for him to bypass what is clear in the constitution, it means there's an upper hand towards what he's being told to do. That is one example. The next thing, I'm telling you, what Kenyans need to read about and understand is the shift that is happening all over the world, and specifically with countries affiliated to the West and the United States of America. When you look at the policies, for example, you've mentioned the issue of housing levy. Any sober Kenyan out there, when you talk to him about the housing project, there's no one who can really see the affordability and really understand the aspect of this housing project. But when you go into the formulation of the New World Order, one of the agendas they are saying is that they want to move the citizens from agricultural land or basic rural areas and bring them into towns in what you call settlement zones for people to live. The president in himself has said it before and before, more than 3 times. He keeps repeating and saying, I think it is time we have to free up land from the rural areas and move into towns. When you look at this housing project agenda, number one, they're saying majority of it will be for social, but part of it will be for sale. One of the credentials they're saying, for you to even be able to buy that house, which, remember, you're buying a private house which sits on public land, and you're buying it at the normal market price. It's not any way affordable. But they've brought another aspect. They're saying, for you to be able to buy that house, you need to provide what we call proof of funds. So in our own ideological understanding, these houses were built for basically the hustlers. So come and ask yourself, where will this Mama Mboga come with pay slips to show that she is able to pay the form of mortgage to pay for these houses? So the main agenda, when you look at the countries which have actualized this kind of housing projects, today, when you go to countries like Holland, the entire agricultural land has been taken over by corporations. So that begs the questions. My friend here has spoken about the issues of loan and borrowing from these big organizations such as IMF and World Bank. What are the guarantees that this government is giving the World Bank or the IMF for them to lend us the money? No one is aware of the agreements. Today, we are told one of the biggest companies in the world, in the name of BlackRock, is coming to invest into this country in our stock exchange. I'm giving you an example.
Well,
when you look at the case,
talk about them coming to buy our parastatals as well.
That's where I'm heading to. That's where I'm heading to. When you look at a country like Ukraine, when they got the funding, remember all the money. Even yesterday, there was approval of about another $61 billion for Ukraine or so. All the money the United States, the IMF, the World Bank has given to Ukraine is not a gift. It's in the form of a loan. But do you know the agreement between the IMF and Ukraine? The collateral for the agreement was agricultural land and state corporations.
I'm sorry, Steve, I've got to interject, and just to maybe seek some clarification.
Yes.
And at the same time, also make a point there. Anyone in this room will know that I don't believe for a minute that the nations behind these institutions that we speak about will ever do anything that is outside of their self-interest or benefit. It doesn't happen.
Yes.
That is just how they are wired. That is
Yes.
what they do.
Yes.
You will not see them involved in a place whereby there will
There's
be
no
no
interest.
direct benefit, whether there will be no benefit, whether it's direct or otherwise. However, that aside, I don't think we can mix issues here. And I think that we are giving administrations of governments a free pass when it then comes to responsibilities that they have to secure and guard the livelihoods of their people.
Yes.
That there are many things that are going on in Kenya, that there are many things that are going on in South Africa, that there are many things that are going on in Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Sudan, take your pick. But we want to say, rather than ask the leaders of these nations to take responsibility for the things that they have been mandated to do by the vote of the people, we want to now say the reason why you are behaving like this is because there's external influence. I do believe that there's external
that has a very big hand.
I do believe that there's
And that's why this is a failed state as you speak today.
Hang on.
Hey.
I do
Yes.
hold on. I do
We are
believe
failing by the day.
that there is external. Okay,
Yes.
I will get a megaphone.
Yes.
Yes.
At this point, I believe that there is external influence.
Yes.
I do not believe that you can take that external influence and blame it for the reason why individuals, whether they've been appointed, whether the tone at the top is one thing or another, and blame that for inadequacies or lack of getting the job done. I think we're conflating issues.
No.
And we need to be
I
very
get-
clear.
yes, I
We
get
need to
where
be
you're coming from.
very, very
I get
clear
where you're coming
that when
from.
doctors go on
Yes.
strike, that when children don't have school fees, that when children don't have capitation, whereby roads are not done, we want to say there's external influence?
No.
No.
And on top of
No.
that,
I-
on top of that,
We
on top
can't.
of that, let's remember that there's no nation on the world that exists by itself. We are members of the global village. Kenya has sent many peacekeeping troops and police officers ever since Kenyatta won. It's nothing new. Number two, the housing project is addressing a real issue. For example, Kibera is real and tangible. It is of no benefit for the West, for Kenya to build houses for people in Kibera. So the fact that there is influence and then there are certain actions does not mean they're the same. It's a logical fallacy. Coincidence is not causation. That's how you correct. Because just because I visit Ndu and then I go home and then I find jollof rice in my house, I will not say it is Ndu who influenced the person in my house to cook, because that's so coincidence is not causation. Yeah.
What I'm trying to tell you, you see, you might put it as a conspiracy theory, but history will judge us. Whatever I'm telling you is something that has a bigger picture on what is happening in the world. I'm not here to say that this government is correct in itself. Let me tell you, when you have a nation where the top of the nation, or rather the president, does not even follow the rule of law, then don't expect anyone in that country to follow the rule of law.
That statement is also not true.
Yes.
The fact that someone ignores certain court orders doesn't mean that they ignore all court orders and all the rules.
You see, we are guided. We are guided. Man is to error, but we are guided by what you call the Constitution.
Yes,
the only thing the president needs to do, or any elected member, or maybe even any citizen, we should abide to what is as per the Constitution.
But are you saying that the president deliberately ignores every rule of law that we have in the country,
not
everything
really.
That's in the Constitution?
Not really.
Yes.
You see, all two wrongs don't make a right at the end of the day.
Yes.
But one thing I'll tell you is that the president acts as a mirror. Now, when you talk of these other administrations of the government and other leaders not following or doing contrary to what the law pertains or what they're supposed to do, it's because maybe they're seeing the reflective mirror. If the mirror of the president, if the mirror is not clear enough for them to follow, then believe you me, we are doomed to fail as a country.
Let me ask you something. Everything that I've heard said about the president, his borrowing habits, the debt, the deep, dark debt hole that we are in.
Yes.
Are we aware that the Uhuru Kenyatta government is the one which began this path?
Exactly.
That this borrowing is not something that occurred. Not borrowing, wanton borrowing, where you just borrow and borrow and borrow.
And it's illegal. But majority of it is illegal. You need to make it clear.
No. I cannot make it clear that it is illegal, because when our parliament passes and allows the government to borrow and go certain limits, there's nothing illegal about that borrowing. The parliament is what gives them that authority, and our parliament has.
So did the parliament give approval from Uhuru's time for them to do what you call domestic borrowing?
Yes.
They did.
Oh, yes,
in fact,
they assent to it.
Yes.
The ones who set the limit.
In fact, domestic borrowing is the one that is most entrenched in our constitution and most encouraged by economists, because you're borrowing in one
But remember, the constitution is very clear on domestic borrowing. It says you cannot borrow domestically for development. Now, when you look at the amounts that were borrowed, even in Uhuru Kenyatta's time, it is clear. During Uhuru Kenyatta's time, he borrowed up to about 6 trillion. It has a limit. The domestic borrowing is usually about 5% of the total budget. But when you look at the sums and the volumes of the money that was borrowed, it is contrary to what is very clear. And no one is speaking about these things.
First and foremost, the Constitution says the opposite of what you said.
Yes.
Any borrowing, any local or international, is supposed to be for development only.
Very good.
Yeah.
But this money they borrowed, we've had the Auditor General clearly stating they cannot connect the volumes of borrowing to the projects they did in terms of development.
Okay, so was your point the project?
You're right.
So that means that is bypassing the law. There is an illegality. I'm talking about the illegality.
Steve, we need to have a flow of ideas.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. We started off with the Hustler Nation, all right? Now we've jumped to the president. Now we are at the Auditor General's report.
Yes.
The Hustler Nation, if you are referring to Kenyans, existed before that particular term was made popular by our current president.
Very true.
Kenyans are hustlers.
Yes.
Kenyans have been argued to be opportunists.
Yes.
You take Kenyans anywhere and they'll always find something that they will do that somebody else wasn't doing.
Yes.
it means Kenyans are an enterprising people. Okay?
And very hardworking.
Extremely hardworking.
Yes.
Now, the reason why we keep gently pushing you towards understanding that when you talk about the New World Order in a discussion where we're talking about the hustler nation, we have no option but to look at it as the promotion of conspiracy theories, because this is a discussion, as you say correctly, that has been there for the longest time. And we know it has been attributed to complete right-wing Christian groups, the Antichrist group. I mean, it's something that has been with us for the longest possible time. Now, it derives its energy and strength from examples that can be used to justify or to prove the existence of this New World Order. But then, if you look at history, as you say, that people should read, we've had empires who had the same thoughts.
Exactly.
And without fail, each and every of those empires have collapsed. Each.
From the time of Hitler, Stalin.
Forget Hitler. I've gone beyond the Byzantine times.
The Roman Empire.
Just name any empire you wish.
Yes.
Like the American Empire right now is in decline. The British Empire was in decline in its time. These were empires that sought to create the very thing you're saying, a new world order.
Yes.
They wanted the world to be fashioned according to them. They all went down. You have the Chinese coming up. They had an empire before that, but now there's a global outlook to the way they do things.
Indeed.
So when you talk about a new world order, when did it begin and when did it end? What you're saying is something that the world has experienced from its existence. And what you're actually saying will come to pass has never come to pass. There have been semblance of it. And then
now, I'll tell you, I've mentioned to you that these are not things that are planned in a day. Remember, this is a formulation that started in the year 1946.
It started earlier
and ever since, till today, formulations are being put to place. The ultimate goal under the biggest organization which spearheads this, called the World Economic Forum, is that the agenda should officially be launched in 2030. I'm not saying it will happen.
Okay.
But that's the biggest problem.
My God.
Sorry,
listen,
Mark, sorry, just allow him to finish because we have to get to...
You know, you listen to respond, but you're supposed to listen to understand.
No, I have actually listened quite a lot.
Go ahead, Steve.
What I'm trying to say is that we are looking at the smaller picture of what is happening in this country. When you look at all these punitive taxes that every Kenyan is complaining, the cost of living and all that, you'll come to understand that part of it is a deliberate attempt or formula to discourage and break the systems that exist economically. When you want to build a new system, the first thing you have to do is to break the existing system.
Okay, well, it's thoughts, right?
Yes.
And, you know, we'd be remiss if we don't let thoughts play out. Steve, thank you for being here this morning. Interesting to hear some of these perspectives and looking at how they all unfold in the future. Asante sana.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.